absolutely, you can get into a PhD program in business in any field with just a bachelor's degree. You don't necessarily need a master's degree. However, there is some really unique things that I wanted to point out. The first thing is the master's degree. It really depends on the country that you're from. So it's really common. So I'm actually Canadian. I did my degree at the University of Western Ontario. It's now Western University, they call it. And it varies very much so across different places. So I actually did a master's degree, and that was really common in Canada. In the United States, it's not nearly as common. You can get into a PhD program from a bachelor's degree. It's actually a little bit more common to do that. In the UK, I know you typically need some sort of master's to get into a PhD program. And I think any sort of country that is much more like the UK system, which Canada was kind of like that, it is generally a little bit more common to do a master's of some sort before you get into a PhD. However, in most business school programs, if you're thinking of going into a business school PhD, or you're thinking of becoming a business professor, like myself, you really do, it increases your chances substantially of getting into a PhD program when you have an MBA. And this is across all different places that you would apply to, right? So it's not just at my own institution, which I typically in these videos, I neglect my institution simply because I want to make sure it's not biased and you can go to any particular place that you want to go to, right? So with this, you can think of your PhD application, and you're thinking when you're applying to getting to become a PhD or whatnot, getting into the system or going into a PhD program, you can think of your application as kind of like a point system. So I know the analogy that I was thinking about is to get your Canadian immigration. They actually have a point system. So every time that you have something, or every sort of credential that you have, increases your chances of getting immigration in Canada. The same thing with a PhD program. Every time that you have something, or if you have an extra credential, or you look remarkable in some sort of way, you get a couple of extra points, right? So if you have a very good undergraduate GPA or average, right, class average, or your average, your grade point average, then you are going to get some points up. If you have a PhD, or if you have a bachelor's degree in engineering or computer science or some really rigorous field like that, you're going to get some points up. If you have a undergraduate degree in, from a very prestigious university, right? So maybe you're coming from Cambridge University or Oxford, or the Indian school, I'm blanking on it, the IIT, there's probably some people that are going to correct me on that, the technological university in India that does really fantastic stuff and it's very hard to get into. Anytime that you come from any school like that where it's very hard to get into, it's very rigorous, that it gives you a jump up, right? So if you have all of those things, you have a fantastic GPA, you come from a really good school, you have done a very rigorous undergraduate program, you have letters of recommendation from people that we know that are doing really wonderful things. Sorry, I'll wait for 1 minute. There they go. So if you do all of that kind of stuff and you add it all together, then you have a very high point system, right? And what an MBA does, it gives you extra points. It essentially gives you extra points, and if somebody's evaluating your application, that's really what they're looking for. Is it will give you a jump up, right? So if we saw somebody that looked exactly the same, if an evaluator for an application saw somebody that looked exactly the same on their application, one of them had an MBA and the other one didn't, highly likely that the person that had an MBA gets has sort of moves up the pecking order, right? So if you think of any program like that, that's essentially what you're doing, is you're adding up all these points. And then here's the interesting caveat: it really depends on the marketplace every single year, right? So every year there's a pool of applicants that will apply. So some years there'll be applicants that there'll be a bunch of MBAs, or there'll be really, really outstanding, right? There'll be a bunch of people that are outstanding, and then the competition is quite high, and that's normal. That's what happens on a, it's sort of counter-cyclical to what goes on with the economy, right? If the economy is really good, nobody wants to do any sort of education. Everybody says the education's not worth it. When the economy's bad, people see the value in education. And then everybody wants to get an education, so they all rush back into universities. So that's really what ends up happening, is that there is, it just depends on the pool that there is. So if you send in your application and you just have a bachelor's degree, but you check off all the other boxes, you have a really amazing GMAT score, you did the GRE and it is fantastic, and you come from a great school, and the sort of pool of applicants doesn't have all of those different things, or it's kind of like, they're clearly not as good as you, then you're likely to get into a PhD program wherever you're applying to, right? However, and letter references are really important too. So, however, if there is only a few, if there is a lot of applicants and they're all outstanding and they all have MBAs, and you don't have an MBA, you just have a bachelor's degree, and they all look the same, they're all, really amazing people, then, it's chances are you're not going to get into that particular program, right? So that's what you have to sort of trade off, and you have to look at that, and that really matters with any particular application. That's why there's lots of variance between schools, right? So getting into the very, very top schools, they're going to have a lot more applications. They have a larger sort of pool of applicants, and then they have, more people that are scoring, that have basically a higher score, right? They checked off more boxes along the way. And then that pool of applicant is bigger, so they might have, at a small institution, they might have, say, 10 people that are rigorous and they're, that are actual real candidates, and they're going to pick like 3 or 4 of those. And then from a really good school, right, the best school you can think of, name the best one that there is, and I'm sure you know which one it is. They're going to have hundreds of applications, and then on top of it, there'll probably be 50 that are all real legitimate sort of, competitors, right, that are very, very legitimate competitors for a particular PhD program. And then they have to go through and pick those ones, right? So it's going to be, if you don't have an MBA and you're applying to that particular school, it's going to be a lot more harder to get in. That means you're going to have to be just a complete rock star on everything else, and you're going to have these amazing letter of recommendations from people they know, and it's just going to be a lot more of a challenge at that moment. So yes, you could definitely do a PhD program. You can get into a PhD program with just a bachelor's degree, but there's lots of caveats with that, and you have to sort of look at that before you decide whether you're actually going to get into, before you can actually get into a PhD program. So hopefully this resolves some of the issues, and this was really helpful for you, for those people that are interested in going and getting a doctorate, which is an undergraduate degree or a bachelor's degree. Again, this is pretty universal across all programs. It's not just a PhD in business. This is very universal across virtually all programs that are competitive, right? So that's it. Hopefully you like this video. If you like it, give me a thumbs up. I do appreciate it. And do subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, take care. Bye.